Hello, Brave Master. Oh my gosh. I am so excited to be here with you. This is episode 200. I wanted to just spend time with you all by myself. I know I usually have amazing guests, and I would love for you to check those out as well. We've had some amazing new guests in the last few weeks, and would love your reviews and your comments and feedback about how those are impacting your life and business, etc. But today is a special day. I'm like we're crossing another milestone, and I really wanted to up-level the conversation around brave and actually dive a deeper into what it means to be radically brave in your life and in your business, etc. So that's what we're going to talk about, and I can't wait to dive in. So first and foremost, if for any of you new to me, I am Jena Rodriguez, the host of the Brave Entrepreneur podcast, and I am a transformational mentor and business growth strategist, and I just adore helping individuals, really up-level their lives and their mindset and their spirituality and their business, so that they can serve and impact in the way that they really are called to impact the world, right? And so for me, what I see and what I've experienced on my own is that it requires a very high level of commitment to being radically brave. And so we're going to dive into what that really means. So I hope you'll join me with this conversation. And certainly when we're finished, please let me know what your thoughts and what your takeaways really are, and what's possible for you now that you've looked at this kind of lens that I'm going to present to you in a different way. So the container we want to kind of dive into is this conversation around how and what does it mean to be radically brave in your life, in your business, in your relationships, everywhere, right? And so brave for me, I've always kind of defined it as, moving through fear. Fear is always going to exist, but it's moving through fear. It's a space of facing yourself, right? And so there's actually three things I want to talk about that I think creates this advanced level of leadership, of self-leadership in our worlds. And this is the three things I want to share with you that really emphasize radically brave, right? There's a difference for me. And so number one, I believe that most of our suffering, most of our struggle and our strife and our unhappiness, or our, the things, it's kind of like the disalignment with what we really want and how we want life to look, and all of that, like all of those things, I think can be wrapped up into one bucket, and I call it attachment. And attachment is what the ego does, right? That part of us that is very reptilian. It's very on purpose. It is there to protect us. It's there to keep us safe. You guys have probably heard of it. And you feel it every single day, is that ego part of us. And I love Wayne Dyer. I even heard Deepak Chopra recently. They call it edging God out, right? EGO. And I think that's a perfect explanation for what ego really is, because the other side of that is that God-given, source-driven, universe-wrapped part of us that is all-knowing. And I call that part of us our true north. And if you would talk to a doctor and bring a level of science into this, they would explain the parts of the brain that actually function inside of these two kind of, arenas, right? The ego versus the true north. And that's what I call it, the true north. And I envision so much of the time this compass, right? This true north of my compass of my life. And when I have external factors that I'm allowing to kind of demagnetize my compass, or to impact me, to shift me off course, to derail me, and the ego is one of those magnetized forces, then my compass goes haywire. And so you're either in true north or you're living in haywire. And when you live in haywire, what I would gather is that you are probably living very close to a level of low vibration emotionally, meaning you're living, I call it the vibe code. And many people, I'm not the first, there's this emotional scales that you can look up. I just happen to call the emotional scale the vibe code in my world and for my clients. And if you have a low vibe, right, that low vibration, then you're hanging out in fear, you're hanging out in disappointment, you're hanging out in anger and just those undesirable feelings and emotions, but they're so real, right? They're very real. And if you're living on this low end of the vibration or the vibe code scale, then your ego is the one playing you most, right? It's haywire, it's chaos, it's crazy town, it's uncomfortable, it's and it's so funny because the ego is trying to make you comfortable, and yet maybe anger, maybe frustration, maybe depression and lack of joy and all of those emotions are your familiar. And so ego will keep us going towards the familiar as much as possible. And that is simply a protection mechanism. So I just want to, number one, offer that if everything we struggle with, everything that really keeps us away from our highest, truest self, all right, that true north, that calm in the middle of the haywire, then, and it's called an attachment, and the ego is in charge of that, then how do we move bravely to a space of predominantly living in high vibe, joy, love, gratitude, appreciation, right? All of those good feelings. And yet so much of the time we run from those feelings. We experience them 10% of the time and everything else is 90%, right? We're frustrated most of the day. We're mad at the grocery store clerk. All of those things that zap our energy, that zap our vibe code, right? That zap us and take away our potentiality. And so the first thing that I believe Radical Brave is, just to kind of bring back to, and connect the dot, is identifying your attachments. And there's many things that attachments can look like. It's expectation, it's fear, it's a requirement that you might have, whether it's in relationship or your own self-requirement, like I have to have it this way in order for me to be okay. That's a requirement. It might look like a kind of a limiting belief of some sort, or a story that is just very limiting in its narrative, right? And it can also look like resistance to the circumstance that we're in. That's attachment. Resistance alone is attachment. And so there's all these different things that can look and show up as what I just kind of summarize as attachment, right? And so once we can identify those attachments, we are moving into a space that is highly self-aware, highly conscious, and we quit leaving our lives up to the victim of circumstance and expecting others to make us happy or please us or right or take care of us in some way, and all of those requirements that are crazy to expect, but that is how we operate until we don't. And when we become radically brave, then we have a huge opportunity to attract the things that we desire, to change the things we don't like anymore, to create new experiences that light us up, to impact the world the way that we want to impact the world, right? And to give more of our true north, of our true self, than just more of our ego that's trying to prove something or trying to get something. And so identifying your attachments is absolutely step one of getting radically brave in your life. If brave is about facing yourself, radically brave is about diving even deeper. It's about jumping into the deep end and wondering where the life raft is, right? And yet it's there. It's called true north. We're so scared of jumping into the deep end with things, with ourselves, with our emotional sadness and attachments and all of those things. And yet it's actually the safest place we can go We're not going to disappear if we face ourselves at the ultimate level. Yet we are going to have to move through some things that are highly uncomfortable in order to clear the cobwebs. So identifying the attachment. So number two, the thing that I want to talk about is dismantling the stories that are underserving your fullest potential. And so again, this is maybe a deeper dive into the attachment called a limiting story, right? Or a limiting belief. But we live in story. Our ego is, and I've heard someone say this, and forgive me, I don't remember who or where I read it, but I've kind of adopted it as a great way to explain it. And that is that our egos live in past projection, right? Living in the past, living in the, oh my gosh, this is what happened, so of course it's going to happen again, and or it's happening again now in my current reality, which all you did was take your past and project it onto the current movie screen that you're living, right? Past is that past projection is where the ego lives, because it's looking for certainty, it's looking for knowing, it's looking for I'm familiar with that, so now I can kind of navigate what's happening now or what's going to happen in the future. And when it moves to the future, which is called future tripping, you start to create the worry and the what if and the, oh my gosh, I can't, what if this happens, and what if this person does this or says that, right? And it's complete story. And so whether it's a story about what is so in your life, what if you change the story? What if you change the perspective? And so you have to dismantle the stories that are underserving you. I get it. Some of our stories really do serve us. They serve us well, right? And so if they are serving you in some way, then I get it. Why dismantle it? And yet there could be an opportunity to make the story even better or a perspective that served you even more. But really it's about making sure that your stories are aligned with the truth of your true north, right? Like knowing what you know to be true is not covered up by what the ego is saying is so that it keeps you safe. So we tell ourselves so many lies every day, right? And, it's like, let's say, one of the things that so I was trying to think of an example. So one of the things that I was very predominantly believing, and it served me for a while until it didn't, was that being busy meant I was doing something well, and that I was accomplishing something, and I was making things happen. And so busy was like, I say this often now because I finally saw it, and I was like, wow, that was exhausting. Is that busy was like a badge of honor for me, and I wore it like something I should be proud of, something I should do more of. And the story is like, if I'm busy, then then I'm up to something. I'm making a difference. Something's really happening. And it was tied to the belief that if I don't do something, then nothing happens, or if I don't take care of it, it doesn't get taken care of. Right? It was very very limiting. It was exhausting. Number one, that was what really broke the camel's back. Was like last November, I was so not just it's like I was busy and I was hustling and I was grinding. Those words I don't even want to use anymore. And I'm not against action. That's not it. But when I had a story around hustle, which related to busy and related to the energy of hustle, like exhausting energy, then it stopped serving me in a positive way. And I basically hit a kind of a rock bottom and had to slow down. And I had to really take inventory, not only of my attachments, especially the attachment to that story that I was making up, but I had to dismantle those stories so that I could make some new ones. Now, I believe you can do less and make more. I believe I am taken care of, and it doesn't have to come from me and my action or my doing. I believe there is a source that is much bigger than me that is taking care of me. I also believe that I am taken care of, and magically people show up and they take care of me and help me out, right? So I was so isolated from even accepting help at times that I couldn't even let it in to my world, right? And so that's a shift. That's a massive shift. And it takes a lot of radical brave to be able to own that. I grieved it. I was ashamed of it for a little bit. I had to move through those emotions of, wow, I have spent my entire life trying to control the outcome, that I kept myself so busy that I didn't have to face anything, right? I didn't have to face it. I didn't have to face that my value was attached to the busyness. And so I had to grieve that. I had to, really experience the sadness around that. And that's what I mean by dismantling those stories and those beliefs, which are in fact stories of some sort, and being willing to look at the things that really you've made up, or you've adopted and made a decision that they are yours, right? Just because our parents said they were so doesn't mean that we didn't have a responsibility to actually adopting it and saying, yep, I agree, right? So nobody can make us believe anything. We choose the belief. We choose and make that decision. And we usually make it very early on in life. And then we go spend our lives trying to prove ourselves right, right? And so that's what I was proving for a very long time. And so dismantling that story is highly important. And the most brave thing we can do is to be willing to look in the mirror and be willing to own our stories that just no longer are serving where we're going and what we're up to and who we are now versus who we were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, right? So that was the number 2 point I wanted to make. Then the third and final conversation I wanted to have, in order to be radically brave, is to have a really strong commitment. A friend of mine today just shared the word conviction, and I'm kind of liking that approach. So the conviction and the commitment to overcoming and outsmarting the ego. And so I've even created what I call the detachment method, which is a way to move past the ego's tricks. And there's many, many tricks that the ego plays. I've clearly identified 11 that I share with my clients and my community. And I've actually, and as I think of one, or I see one, or I observe one, I just add it to the list. And there's ego tricks that every day that we are using to manage, to maintain, to mitigate risk. The ego doesn't want to die off. The ego doesn't want to go anywhere. The ego wants to stay right where it is and get smarter and smarter to keep you where you are, instead of allowing you to shift forward, to change, to grow, to expand, and to step into what your true north knows is the next level of you. And so if you're not committed to the not committed or convicted to the overcoming and outsmarting the ego, it will run you from this day forward. It will be your predominant behavior. And unfortunately, that behavior actually gives us the most suffering. It creates the most discord between our relationships. When we are more focused on what we're losing, which is very ego-driven, then we are missing out on what we are gaining and where we can be grateful and the true experience of friendship and relationship and love and joy, etc. So until we're willing to have that level of conviction, and of course that's mine. I am on a daily basis. I'm in meditation. I am journaling. I am hyper aware of what my ego does to keep me in the illusion of safety. And I'm on a journey till the day I die of being able to outsmart it, right? And to shift the scale, tip the scale from living in ego 90% of the time and true north 10% of the time, to 10% of the time ego and 90% true north, right? So that is my prayer for you guys. That is my wish, is that we could all start to live in a place of true north. And the only way to do that is that we have to get radically brave about how we approach our life and our experience of life, and how fast do we look in the mirror. And until we're willing to really look in the mirror and own our stuff, right, and take full personal responsibility for how our life is, our egos will continue to shift the blame and create the chaos, and to keep us content, keep us comfortable, and keep us away from our biggest and best self. And that is what I'm on a mission to do, is not only for myself, it is my own personal journey, and I am still in it. It's not a done deal. But the more I teach it, the more I am the student, and the more I talk about it, the more I learn. And so that's what I wanted to offer you, especially on this milestone, this 200 episode milestone of the Brave Entrepreneur podcast. And it has been such an amazing labor of love. And I've appreciated all of the communication and the conversations and the dialogue that I've had with my guests, but more importantly with you, the audience, and would love to know what you take away from this. Where are you being, less than radically brave? And what area of your life do you want to change? What do you want to drastically shift in the direction that feels good and lights you up, and fear is in the way, or you're hesitating, right? I'll leave you with an ego trick, and then I'm going to share with you how you can get more information about the ego tricks and the detachment method, etc. Is one of the I think very common ego trick. I mean, they're all pretty common. We're all using them. But one of them is when then, right? When I have this, then I will do that. When I have enough money, then I will invest in a coach. When I have time, I will meditate. Then I'll meditate. When I am less busy, right, then I will take a vacation. That stuff is, talk about a story, right? The win then is the ultimate story that is very underserving, right, to our fullest potential. And so when we can catch ourselves saying anything like that or a variation thereof, and you can stop it in the tracks and go, wow, what's really going on here for my ego? What am I resisting? What am I afraid of? What is, like, I did this not too long ago. I was, we were selling our house in Houston, and we were moving to LA, California, and here I am in LA, California. However, that process was moving really slow because I had a win then going on. When we sell the house, then we'll move to California. And because my ego was like, of course we have to sell the house. We have to, get some of the money out of the house. You can't just, move across the country and still have a house for sale here. I mean, talk about story, right? And I caught myself, and within minutes, I shifted that decision, and I dismantled that story. And I said, oh my gosh, that is keeping us away from what we're creating and who we're becoming and why we're moving to LA, California in the first place. And the longer we hold on to that, the more we just delay the inevitable and delay the process of us stepping into our next chapter. And so I immediately made a decision, and I said, okay, no more. We're picking a date. And 1 month later, I picked a date that was 1 month later, and it was July 8th, 2019, and we moved to LA. The house didn't sell until October. So I moved, we made it work, and we have been super excited. Things have really started to shift quickly because we got out of our own way, because we changed the narrative called win then. And so I just leave you with that. That's a very predominant trick that the ego plays in our life, is when then. When I graduate from college, I'll do this or whatever. Like, just remember all the when thens that that we live with. And another one is like, when I turn this age, then I'll do that. I mean, clearly there's some legalities to some of our age limits, but there's so much limitation in the when then that keeps us from just stepping forward into our lives and our desires. So Would love to know what your win then is, because I am clear that probably 100% of us have one. And so please identify what your win then is. Give me a comment or two. Let me know how this is impacting you. Certainly, I would appreciate a review on iTunes, and give us some feedback and some love there. And so more people can hear this. I can help other people get radically brave. And if you want more information, more deep dive into how do I finally make that change that I'm really wanting to make, and to get out of my own way, identify what I want, what's right for me, and then take the necessary steps to detach from the attachments, right? Attachment detachment process, and identify and recognize the ego tricks that keep us playing small, right? If you're up for that game, then I certainly have an invitation for you. First, come join my free Facebook group. That is Brave Entrepreneurs in the Facebook group. And you can get to it by going to bravemasters.com/bravefb. FB stands for Facebook, right? So bravemasters.com/bravefb. And thank you, BB, my dog. Then you can sign up and RSVP for our next master class. Depending on when you are viewing this, we have one happening here in November, and it's like a 5-day free training. I pour into you. I commit to you that you will have a transformation by the time you get done with that class, and it is perfectly free. And it's an amazing opportunity to work with me one-on-one and in the group and in the community, and to walk through these steps and processes and get highly aware of what ego tricks are keeping you stuck in where you are versus where you want to be and what you want to have. So nothing outside of us is anything less than the reflection of what's going on internally. You have to have an internal resolve in order to have an external result, right? So we want to work on the internal resolve, and we're going to get your brave on. That's the class. And so join me in the Facebook group. Then you'll have plenty of opportunity to RSVP to the class. And if you miss this one, there will be plenty of more opportunities to learn about it. So come join the community. That's my invitation for you today. All right. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support over these last 4 years. Holy cow. And these 200 episodes, we have some amazing guests that we just completed with. And so make sure you go back to all the episodes, whether it's on iTunes or YouTube, or I post them on my Facebook channels. And check out what they are doing to get brave, and what their story really has been in their past, as well as we've got some future episodes coming up that are really, really powerful, and some profound dialogue. So don't miss them if you really want to, step up your game here. So, all right, everyone, until next time, let's go get our brave on. Talk to you then.